backyard. Number one, it's your business. Number two, nobody else can see it. The problem comes from when we have extreme problems, and we've had them in the village, and everybody knows it. You can cite a block, you can cite a house, and we don't have anything on the books. And so really, it is a very straightforward way of helping all the residents, and you can't imagine how many people say, I have the right, we shouldn't have this thing, but in the meantime, you should do something about so-and-so down the block. It happens so many times, so now we have not only we are charged with the responsibility of addressing it, but now we have, and there's been a number of different people having input into this, a law that gives us a basis for addressing it. What is our way of addressing it? Code goes down and talks to people, and if there's an issue of aesthetics, we usually don't even, that's not even on the radar. We never have those kinds of things. What we have is a house that has been under construction, that had 2 cement precasts filled with 3 feet of water that presented a real danger to kids who might tumble into it. There was nothing like that on the books. Okay? So what we had on the books were things like the phrase attractive nuisance. Well, what is that? Okay? So we have a basis now for addressing things that will bother neighbors. Most of these things, I would say almost all of these complaints, come from the residents. It's not us going around, the aesthetics police saying, you have to do something with your tree. Okay? But we have had tree, and by the way, if there was one word in our meetings that is the most frequently spoken, it's trees. And we would be remiss if we didn't have something in there about trees. So when we have people with trees that are endangering their neighbor's property, when we have issues of people having trees that eventually they're going to cut up into firewood, but meantime, 2 years later, huge logs are laying around. At some point, somebody's going to want to say something. It's usually because a neighbor complains, and then we say, not for nothing, but can you start cutting up the wood? And that's usually the way it's resolved, but at least it's on the books.
Linda Houston, 1 New Street. I live on the corner of 1 New Street and Chestnut, Chestnut New. And I support this proposed law because for the past 5 years, I have tried to have my next door neighbor clean up his yard. He's a pack rat. He doesn't even live there. He uses it as a storage bin for cars, and even the house is stored up to the tippy top with junk, and it's a public health issue in terms of safety as well. So I support the proposal.
Thank you.
Okay, Jeff, nobody disagrees with the fact that these abandoned houses, all that, if we need some law on the books for those kind of things, yes. I don't think anybody really disagrees with that. What people object to, and I'd like you to kind of listen to us, so maybe there's a need for the law, but maybe this law needs to be adjusted so that it doesn't seem like the issue is so objective, so subjective, because it says failure to maintain. When it shall be determined by the building inspector or code enforcement officer that a property is not being maintained in accordance to this chapter, well, I mean, that's subjective. That's subjective. And I think that there should be something in this law. I mean, I don't want a deteriorated property next to my house either. However, I think there should be less subjective language and more specific language. And, I mean, this is not a gated community. And some of the stuff, and some of the wooded areas, the old areas, have a lot of woods, have a lot of stuff, and people feel like they're living in the country, and people, in Tinker's Bluff, might not want to live there, but they don't have to live there. They live in Tinker's Bluff, and they can have that thing, and the people who want to live in the forested area can have that. So anyway, I think that if we need the law, I can't argue that, I don't know, I haven't really studied it, but I think that the subjective nature of the way it's written should be changed, because it's really, like Cindy said, it's a matter of how you view it. And so maybe you should read it over again and take a look at it and see if you can change what appears to be subjective to real criteria, like the 11 inches of the lawn. I mean, that seems a little detailed, but, okay, and then we should probably get on with the comments, too.
I did. Lois, I don't think you were at that one. We actually had this discussion when we were kind of getting input, when we cobbled together this law. And for every comment that said it's too subjective, there was somebody who said, well, what do you mean 11 inches? So if my lawn was 12 inches high, you're gonna give me a summons? And then people started talking about these gated communities and so on. And what we kind of thought would be an appropriate way to go is to pretty much keep things the way they are in Poquott, which is, yes, there are areas that are more wooded, and there's no accounting for aesthetics, and people are going, if they want to paint the house pink, that's fine with everybody else. But there are certain things where, when the neighbors start to complain, and we get the calls, we have to then go and do something.
Yeah,
And what we do, the process has always been that code goes over, or if it's a building violation, the building inspector goes over, and they talk it over, they investigate. In the case of a building code violation, usually there's no back and forth, you gotta take care of that. But they still don't get a summons. And it has always been neighborly, it has always been, please try and take care of it. We have had a couple of people who have dug in their heels, either because of psychopathology or
Well, you said that already, but this thing about when it shall be determined by the building inspector and code enforcement, and then the word unsightly is in there, so so I would like you to think about it. Everybody is here because there's a problem with it, so maybe you should think about.
I'm just telling you how it got to that point.
I'm not interested in how it got to that point. I'm interested in getting it taken care of.
Yeah, mostly I agree with
You have to
Lois.
say it again.
It has validity. I'm Steve Weisenberg. It's got validity, but it maybe has overreach. What's the source of the language? Where did it come from? Who wrote it?
Frank Schaefer, he's walking out because he said, don't blame me.
He wrote it?
No, what happened, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are a lot of these laws already in existence.
So it's boilerplate from other
So
laws?
laws
And
for
was
that,
it
and
brought,
then we, yeah.
can you tell us which law it's taken from? Did anybody know?
Various ones. We're doing it-
I can't hear you.
Various villages and
Various-
towns and
so-
state, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, I was busy. What are we talking, property maintenance?
Yeah.
Property maintenance.
Portions of the property maintenance came from the International Code Council, which is adopted by New York State. So if you were to go under New York State buildings and codes, you would find a copy of the entire section in the International Codes Council property maintenance law, adopted by New York State.
So you personally went to that? You did this?
I'm certified to enforce that.
Right. I'm asking what the source of the,
So that was part of the source, was the International Codes
but
Council.
who was the person that took the words and put them down, put them together, compiled them?
Trustee
Did
Thompson
all of you-
and I worked on it together.
Yes.
Trustees do that? No.
But
Where'd it come
once
from?
we got, Frank had a bunch of it, I added to it.
It went to the
We
board.
forwarded it
Okay.
to the trustees.
All right. So
We've
I
talked to the
presume
residents.
you're okay with making adjustments to it, as just as they do at the federal level,
That's why we're
right?
here, yes.
Okay.
That's really fun.
I just wanted to say one other thing, if I'm allowed to. It appears that somebody was removed from their seat.
This has nothing to do with the public hearing.
It's not okay to say that at a public hearing? It happened at a public hearing.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Jim?
There's public comments coming.
Yeah, this is only public comments about this law.
Okay, so are you saying that I can't make the comment now, or that I can't ever make the comment?
You can make it when we get to public comments.
Okay.
Roger?
So, Roger Flood, I have the draft from November 2, I don't know if it changed after that,
It did.
but, yes,
Yes.
it did change? Okay, so, but I see in this section, 120.
There was just a couple of drafting changes. There was nothing significant.
Okay.
None of the regulatory or enforcement provisions
All right.
changed.
So in the section failure to maintain, it doesn't actually mention summons at all. It talks about code enforcement, and then a notice served by registered mail, and then if nothing happens to that, it goes to the Board of Trustees, which then can adopt a resolution that declare what the action should be. So I'm not sure where the summons information is, but it's not in here. But what seems to be missing,
That's exactly what we do now. Okay, but we don't have the right, we didn't have the right code to have it be written as a
okay, because
summons.
I've just heard some discussion of summonses before, that
We have to, for a number of things that go on in the village, we have to, the Board of Trustees has to actually vote to proceed. It's been around for a long time, so that's where that is.
okay, so the intention is that, well, so the rest of the comment is that there's been a lot of discussion about standards or communities, what's nice here isn't nice there, whatever it is. But it seems there needs to be a mechanism for feedback for particular instances. Is something actually, the way you figure out if something is an overreach is that at the point where there is no cooperation or there's stalling, then there should be a mechanism that the community can make their issue opinion known. And the best way to do that, as you can see, is a public hearing. And so what seems to be appropriate is that the next step before assessing court costs and administrative fees is that there has to be a public hearing where the community gets the message, the situation is laid out, and then there's a chance for the community feedback to say, that firewood pile is not out of control, what are you doing? Or, yes, this is a serious situation, the community is behind this. And that way, there's some feedback that says which are the issues that actually bring the full force of this law into, make it apply, and which are the issues that they just, it's not worth that effort, and, or not appropriate. I won't say not worth, it's just not appropriate. So I think one of the things that needs to be in here before, or maybe it comes at step D, is that if the trustees want to pursue this, then there has to be a public hearing where the case is presented, and then the public has a chance to state whether this is in fact something that doesn't meet the community standards or not. And I think that'll be pretty obvious.
Thank you.
Can I ask Roger a question? I'm sorry, Roger,
Yes, sir.
you're not talking in health and safety issues though, right?
Well, there are many parts, as has been mentioned before, that are covered elsewhere. And if they're part of the fire code, if they're part of something else, then they're covered. They don't rise to the level of a property maintenance issue that requires the what's in step D, or the penalty and fines. They just don't rise to that based on maintenance issues alone.
Okay, so something that's not covered under a different law.
Well, I think you can find a route to enforce many things under different laws, but just get to the point where, if it's a discussion of as I say, if my firewood pile, someone thinks it looks ugly, then this shouldn't come into account, you know. And so, so I think if under this law, one is gonna pursue things, then it needs to go to a place where, since a lot of these things are extremely subjective, that there's a chance to get the feedback that says, yeah, we're all behind this, or, you know, why are you wasting our time?
Just subjective issues, basically, is what you're saying.
Right, well, one could say that a lot of these are pretty subjective.
Okay, all right.
No?
Bill Poquott, 18 Walnut. So a couple things. I think I live probably on one of the best blocks because it's access to Walnut Beach. But if you've gone down Walnut, it's probably one of the worst blocks because it's got every single house that you've mentioned, whether it's a zombie house or just a house that's not being maintained. So it sounds like everybody wants to have some type of a guideline in place, but some people don't want it too subjective, and some people don't want to hear that their grass is 11 inches. So, you know, we just want the front of the houses to be clean and appealing. That's all. No one's telling you that you have to have 11-inch. Well, we don't have grass, so it doesn't really matter. But you know, you shouldn't have to tell people you're right to bring your pails in. You shouldn't have to tell people that trees from Sandy that have been down for 2 years shouldn't be in your front. It should be cut up and stacked as firewood on the side of your house, or wherever you do it, like most people do it. And I think that's all we're really asking for, right? We're not trying to have a new code enforcement where somebody comes around with a megaphone and a spotlight and goes, "Hey, what are you doing there?" I don't like that. You know, we don't want that. But we do want to have people that understand that if you don't take care of your property, your neighbors aren't going to be happy with it. Or if you're driving down my block to go to the beach and you don't live on my block, you want to pass the garbage to get to the beach. Right? I've only been here 11 years. We spent a lot of money on our house. We spent a lot more to make it look nice and to make it livable. Everybody doesn't have to do it to the extreme I think that we did, but at least be clean and tidy. And you know, my neighbors never brought us people around my mailbox for 11 years. They've never left that spot.
They just bring the garbage to the.
The garbage just goes there. It's convenient.
It's easier.
I have a big pail on wheels, I just wheel it in and out, that's, you know. But if we had to add something to the law that I think is missing, it's the bamboo issue that we have scattered around the village. Since we didn't adopt Brookhaven, I think it's important that before it gets too out of hand, that we throw the bamboo law into
And
the.
it's just a big weed, it goes crazy.
And when you don't see the bamboo, it's traveling on the ground. It's your foundation. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, I want to
Yes,
support
name your address.
Ron Longacre. I live in 49 Van Brunt Manor Road. And I'd like to support what Roger said. I think it's important in these subjective issues that, you know, like the garbage pails or whatever, you know, that there's certain things that if the community of people think it is, you know, egregious and then they should have it, or think not. There should be a way in these subjective issues that aren't covered by, you know, safety and stuff are covered by other laws. These objective issues, there should be a chance for the community to say, yes, you're right, this is terrible, you know. They should have their pails back, or saying, we want him to have the right to have his pails out there. Because it is this law is for the community, and so there should be a stage at which the community can give their input when these subjective issues come up. I think that's a good idea. Should be added to it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
From my understanding, sorry, I brought Bowlesy, Chestnut Avenue. From my understanding, there's a new New York State law, as Jeff said.
It's not new. It's the most recent update
So aren't we subject to New York State, can't you use the New York State law to tackle issues that you've had in the past that you didn't have backing? You can use that law as backing.
Yes.
Why do we need our own different village law?
I guess, what I would have you ask yourself, everybody, is it better to be more informed or less informed? Obviously it's a rhetorical question,
I don't
The-
understand how the rhetorical
the-
question addresses this.
the law that we have been under, which is the New York State law, is very extensive, in some cases more restrictive than we would want to be. And also, we're pretty much required to have our own law because we're in a cooperative village. And that was at the introduction to this whole thing. So it's an opportunity, really, for us to, instead of saying, we have one more way that we have our eyes on you, it's not us. We're residents here too. The idea is that we can have our own kind of community set of values. We're never gonna all agree on what is the aesthetic that we choose to live by as a village. But we have at least some things that we have in agreement that we've culled from the state law, that we say, this is something that we feel is worth stating as a community norm. And, or that it has something to do with health and safety. So we value that. So it's as much a statement of where we're all coming from as it is a legal basis for us to somehow grab somebody and give them a fine. And it has never been the style of this village to be going up to people and slapping them with some kind of offense. Usually it starts with neighbors, and then it goes to code, who says, you really need to take care of that. It's when it gets to court that you have your say, and actually, that's where probably we would have other people coming to bat for somebody who could say, I'm a neighbor, I don't have a problem with it, So there probably is a way to have that done. Because court is where you're either found to be, and I'm not gonna say guilty, you're either found to be not in keeping with what the village, which is all of us, generally accepts as
There is
a
no
norm.
general in this village. There are many people with different opinions.
Yes,
As
and
it
you know what,
exists in all the
and
meetings.
that's true of pretty much every law that's on the books. I mean, somebody can say,
So you're speaking generally as a village, but you note dissent, and you're not, there's no general.
but ultimately, we have judges. And a judge is going to say, especially our judge, is going to say, couldn't you just straighten that up? Like, what's the issue? And if somebody says, I have a right to keep my property that way, then push comes to shove. We sometimes have to say, all right, then you're gonna have to pay a price for that. But usually, it doesn't. That's the nice thing about being a small village. It doesn't usually get to that point. But we need it when we need it.
Does the New York State law have the steep fines that the village is calling?
New York State law, the comparable New York State law is a misdemeanor. And this law would, a ticket that's written under this law would not be a misdemeanor, it would be a violation. The comparable New York State law has a $1,000 fine, and this law has a lower fine.
Comparable what, I'm sorry?
New York State law has a $1,000, I believe the
For
fine is
property
$1,000.
maintenance?
Yeah, yes, I believe it's $1,000.
And what is the violation of that? I mean, if you're saying somebody's yard doesn't look, there's a $1,000 fine?
Failure to New York State law has things like failure to maintain, failure to trim your trees, disrepair. Windows have to be maintained in good condition. All services of the house all exterior surfaces of the house have to have a coating of paint on them, things like that.
And just in the idea of subjective, a little while ago, the mayor called one person out for taping, but somebody else in the same vicinity was taping and nothing was said. So it's that subjectiveness that gets to people, that's an unfair enforcement.
That person wasn't being intimidating and harassing,
Neither was the person who was called out.
in your opinion. Lois?
Yeah, if Joe says that that's the New York State law, why do we have so much problems? I mean, why couldn't we enforce the New York State law? I mean, why haven't, unless I totally misunderstand, why haven't we been enforcing the New York State law? Or having someone enforce the New York State law, because the New York State law covers the village. So, I mean, this is like, so I don't, I mean, I'm real, I mean, like, I don't want a dilapidated house next to me, and I don't want real subjective stuff, but what Joe mentioned, anyway, I think, so I asked the question, why, Joe, can we enforce the New York State law in this village?
Yes.
We can?
Yes.
Okay, so we can do that, so,
We
so I'm
probably
very
have to,
confused.
there may be one or two changes we have to make in our code, but we could do some elements of it, yes.
Any other comments?
We're working on that now.
Joe?
Oh, Joan Hubbard, Van Brunt Manor Road. So if this was very interesting, if you say that houses have to have a coat of paint on them and the windows have to be, why aren't those New York State requirements enforced when we have dilapidated houses in this village?
That's a question for the justice.
No, it's a question of why or not summons is given to the dilapidated houses like Mr. Poquott was mentioning on Walnut, when they have windows that are whatever and falling apart and all that. Why aren't they given summonses if that's New York State law?
They are.
They are given
Yes,
summonses.
we've gone through this process
So
to
it
get it to
seems
court,
like-
and we're not following the New York State law, so we need to have a code change.
It
Joe,
seems like,
Yes.
yeah, I've listened to you an awful lot tonight.
I
You
think
know.
she said.
I hear you.
Wow,
So
she gets it.
it seems like if this law exists, we don't need all this new law, because that would be a really of a concern to everyone, that a house has not even painted, we would all agree that that should be a requirement. It's just so I don't know why we need to go into this other law, which seems so subjective in so many ways. And it's up to interpretation, and when someone's left to interpret, I think it leads to a lot of favoritism, and I would just suggest that we enforce the New York State law. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Mark Wiggins, I'm from Birchwood Avenue, and I just want to reiterate what Roger said and some of the other people. That, you know, I know how difficult it is to write some code like this. It's very, very challenging. But when you have areas, or when you have it written such that it can be interpreted widely, I think you're leaving yourself open to charges that it's going to be enforced in not evenly across the village, and so I think it would be better if the law could straighten out those subjective areas and try to either, you know, if it hasn't been a problem, then perhaps eliminate those words, or change them in such a way so they're not so subject to interpretation.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? No, you
I'll cut this short.
I hope one of you will inquire, would query about the situation, particularly about grass length. In the case that a homeowner is out of town, posting a notice on the door not only notifies others that the owner is not home, but is ineffective in notifying the person who is away. What happens if some weeds are taller than the grass? Who is measuring? This is not the Poquott I want to live in, particularly if enforcement is by an outside body being paid by fines. I have never seen a situation in Poquott which would fit the violations listed, but I am sure that an unfriendly body could find unbeautiful personal property or long grass or a messy wood pile if they looked hard. Is it only going to matter how things look from the street, or are they gonna sneak around and look at the backyard too? Signed, Mary Scranton, Van Brunt Manor Road.
Do I have a motion to?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
What was that?
Because everybody's too busy talking.
We're keeping the 11 inches. So,
We can't hear you, what you just did.
We close the public hearing for the new law 120 property maintenance. Okay, so now I'll call the regular meeting to order.
Just one question, with the public, is there still a chance for written comments to come in, or is that closed also?
That's why.
No, not this, no. We have the comments that are here and the written one that we got. Okay, the meeting will start at 8:05. Pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
announcements. Santa will be at Village Hall from, is it 2 to 4 or 2 to 5?
2 to 4.
2 to 4 on
But I'll
Sunday.
probably be there before and after.
Okay, on December 11th, that's the last day that they'll accept toys for Tots. And on December 18th, the Setauket Fire Department will be coming through the village between 5 and 6 with Santa. Reports, public safety?
There is really nothing to report in public safety. However, there was a new safety officer. Cindy. Hired.
I'm sorry,
Is Cindy here?
yes,
Okay.
yes. Public safety. So I just, a couple of things, I actually wanted to thank the mayor for your involvement with the fraternity house and your involvement starting with the university. We haven't had any problems I'm aware of since before Halloween, so, but
Yeah.
we still have 10 summonses outstanding that should be going to court this month.
Okay.
So that has quieted down, so we appreciate that. Also, we have a new hire that we're asking a resolution to approve, Cindy DeBello. She has prior code enforcement experience from another village, and she's currently an active law enforcement officer in Suffolk County.
Welcome.
Other than that, I don't have any other stats for you since I just came back from vacation.